Derek adjusted his backpack as he trudged deeper into the dense forest. The late afternoon sun filtered through the canopy, casting dappled shadows on the forest floor. He was a field researcher, exploring uncharted territories for unique plant specimens. Yet today, something felt different. The air seemed heavier, and an eerie silence blanketed the woods. As Derek reached a small clearing, his breath caught. The ground ahead was scorched, blackened in a perfect circular shape. At the center lay something he'd never seen before, a strange, silver object, half buried in the earth. It gleamed faintly, its surface smooth and flawless, with no visible seams or markings. Curiosity overpowered caution as Derek stepped closer. The object hummed softly, vibrating ever so slightly. He crouched down, trying to make sense of what it could be. A satellite, an experimental drone. Before he could touch it, a soft rustling sound came from behind. Derek spun around, his heart pounding. Standing there, partially hidden behind a tree, was a figure unlike anything he'd ever imagined. She was tall and graceful, with skin that shimmered like 1,000 tiny prisms reflecting the fading sunlight. Her eyes, large and luminous, glowed with a faint violet hue. She stepped forward cautiously, her gaze locked onto Derek. He froze, unsure whether to run or stay. Then, to his astonishment, she spoke. "What is the name of this planet, human?" Her voice was melodic, almost hypnotic, yet carried an undertone of authority. Derek blinked, struggling to process what he was seeing and hearing. "Earth," he finally managed to say, his voice shaky. The alien woman tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "Earth," she repeated, as if tasting the word. Who are you?" Derek asked, his voice steadier now, though his mind still raced with questions. "I am Calitha," she said simply, her tone guarded. "I did not mean to come here. My ship, it malfunctioned." Derek glanced back at the silver object in the clearing. "That's your ship?" Calitha nodded. "It is damaged. I need to repair it, or I cannot leave." Derek hesitated, weighing his options. This was clearly no ordinary encounter. The logical part of his brain screamed at him to report this to the authorities, but a deeper instinct told him to stay quiet. This was his chance to witness something extraordinary, something no one else on Earth might ever experience. "I can help," he said cautiously. Calitha's eyes narrowed slightly, as if trying to gauge his intentions. "Why would you help me?" Derek shrugged. "Because it's the right thing to do." For the first time, a flicker of surprise crossed her face. She seemed to consider his words, then gave a small nod. "Very well, human, but know this, I do not trust easily." As the sun dipped below the horizon, the two unlikely allies stood together, their worlds about to collide in ways neither could predict. Derek led Calitha deeper into the forest, following her cautious steps as she navigated the terrain. The air was cooler now, and the distant calls of birds filled the silence between them. Derek stole glances at her, marveling at her shimmering skin and the way she seemed to glide over the ground without making a sound. After a short walk, Calitha stopped and pointed ahead. "There," she said softly. Derek's eyes widened as he saw what lay in the clearing. The silver object he had seen earlier wasn't just a strange artifact. It was part of a much larger structure. Most of it was buried beneath the soil, but the parts visible above the ground were unlike anything he could comprehend. The ship's surface pulsed faintly, glowing in shades of blue and white, as though it were alive. Strange patterns rippled across its metallic surface, constantly shifting and reforming. A large gash ran along one side, blackened edges indicating some kind of explosion. Derek stepped closer, but Calitha held out her hand, stopping him. "Do not touch it," she warned. "The energy it emits can harm your kind." He nodded, taking a step back. "Can it be fixed?" Calitha knelt beside the ship, placing her hands on its surface. Her fingers glowed faintly as she concentrated. Derek watched, fascinated, as the ship responded to her touch, faint symbols and lights appearing beneath her palms. After a moment, she sighed and turned to him. The core is intact, but I need specific materials to repair the damage. Without them, I cannot leave. What kind of materials? Derek asked, eager to help despite not knowing how. Calitha hesitated. Your kind uses metals and energy sources that may be compatible. I will need tools and components to improvise. Derek thought for a moment. I know where we can get tools. There's an old workshop near my cabin. It's not much, but it might have something useful. Calitha stood, her expression unreadable. If you are lying to me, human, it will not end well for you. I'm not lying, Derek said firmly. If I wanted to harm you, I wouldn't have offered to help. She studied him for a moment longer, then gave a small nod. Very well. Show me this workshop. As they started walking, Derek couldn't help but ask, why were you so far from your home? What brought you here? Calitha's face darkened. I am a scientist. My people seek knowledge of the stars, but we are hunted. The Empire does not tolerate those who refuse to serve their cause. Derek felt a chill run down his spine. Empire? You mean there are others out there? Yes, Calitha said quietly. And if they find me here, your planet will not be spared. The weight of her words settled heavily in Derek's mind. As they reached the edge of the forest, he realized helping Calitha wasn't just about her survival. It might be the key to protecting Earth itself. Derek and Calitha arrived at the old workshop just as the last rays of sunlight faded behind the trees. The small, weather-beaten building had once been a place for tinkering and repair, but now it sat abandoned, filled with dust and forgotten tools. The door creaked as Derek pushed it open, the musty smell of old metal and wood filling the air. Calitha stepped inside cautiously, her eyes scanning the space. The fluorescent lights flickered on, casting a dim, cold glow over the cluttered room. Derek motioned to the workbench, which was piled high with various tools, wires, and small mechanical parts. This is it, he said, trying to sound confident. I don't know what will work, but we can try. Calitha's eyes narrowed as she examined the room. She seemed unimpressed by the human tools, but she didn't comment. Instead, she walked over to a metal shelf in the corner, pulling down a few rusted pieces. She turned them over in her hands, analyzing them as if they were intricate pieces of a puzzle. Derek watched, unsure of how to help. I don't know much about technology, he admitted, but I'll try to find whatever you need. Calitha glanced up, meeting his gaze. Your planet's technology is crude, but I will make do. You seem resourceful. Her words were faintly approving, but Derek sensed the weight of her mistrust. She didn't fully trust him, not yet. But despite her cold exterior, he could tell she was beginning to rely on him, if only a little. I'm just trying to help, Derek said, rummaging through a pile of wires and gears. We'll figure it out. Calitha didn't respond immediately. She was deep in thought, her brow furrowed as she studied the ship's design in her mind. Derek watched her, still amazed by the fact that an alien from another world was standing in his workshop. He couldn't shake the feeling that everything in his life had changed in an instant. After a few moments, Calitha spoke again, her voice softer. I did not expect to find assistance here. Your people are not like those of the Empire. Derek glanced up, surprised by the change in her tone. The Empire? What's it like? Why are you running from them? Calitha hesitated, then turned away, her eyes fixed on a pile of scrap metal. The Empire is vast, cruel, and merciless. They conquer worlds, enslaving those who resist. I was a scientist, studying the stars. When I refused to help them destroy innocent planets, they came for me. Derek felt a pang of sympathy. That's horrible, he said quietly. No one should live like that. Calitha's eyes softened, though only for a moment. Your kindness is unexpected, human. Most of my kind would have seen you as a threat. But you are different. Derek didn't know how to respond. He wasn't sure what made him offer his help, but it didn't matter now. He wanted to help Calitha. He wanted to show her that humans weren't all the same. "I'm just trying to do what's right," he said simply. "I don't want you to be alone." She met his gaze again, and for the first time, Derek saw a hint of trust in her eyes. "We'll need to work quickly," Calitha said, her voice suddenly urgent. "If the Empire tracks my ship's energy signature, we won't have much time." Derek nodded. "Then let's get to work." As the two of them began sorting through the tools and materials, an unspoken understanding passed between them. Derek knew that helping Calitha wasn't just about fixing her ship. It was about protecting Earth from the threat that followed her. And despite the dangers, he was ready to face whatever came next. The workshop buzzed with quiet tension as Derek and Calitha worked side by side, the steady hum of the old lights the only sound between them. They had gathered all the materials they could find, but still there was something missing. Calitha's hands moved quickly and precisely, her alien abilities melding with the human tools as she tried to make sense of the damaged ship. Derek watched her carefully, amazed by her skill. Every time she touched something, it seemed to react to her, glowing with faint energy. But despite her efficiency, the fear in her eyes remained. She was constantly glancing toward the window, as if expecting someone, or something, to appear. "How long do we have?" Derek finally asked, his voice breaking the silence. Calitha didn't answer immediately, her focus fixed on the small device she was trying to repair. "I do not know," she said finally, her voice low. "The Empire's ships are fast. They track their prey relentlessly." Derek felt a chill creep up his spine. The thought of the Empire reaching Earth, of aliens hunting Calitha, made his blood run cold. He had to help her, not just for her sake, but for the safety of his world. Calitha stood up abruptly, her eyes narrowing as she stared through the workshop's dusty window. Derek followed her gaze, squinting into the growing darkness. "They are coming," she whispered, a sharp edge to her voice. "I can feel them." Derek's heart raced. He didn't know how to protect her. What could a human do against an empire of aliens? He had no weapons, no backup, but he had to try. "Hide," Calitha said suddenly, grabbing his arm. "The energy from this place will attract their sensors. If they find us here, they will destroy this planet." Derek's mind raced. "We can't just hide. They'll track you down anywhere." Calitha's eyes softened, but there was a sadness there. "They are not interested in humans. But I am their target. They will take me and burn this world to the ground just to get to me." Derek's mind made a split-second decision. "I'll draw them away. You can use the time to finish the repairs." Calitha shook her head quickly. "No, it is too dangerous. They will catch you, and that will only make things worse." But Derek was already moving. "If I don't do something, we both die. I'm not leaving you to face them alone." Calitha's face twisted in frustration, but she didn't stop him. She knew he was right. The weight of the decision settled between them. Derek wasn't just helping her survive anymore. He was taking a stand for both of them, for Earth itself. Calitha grabbed his arm one last time, her grip firm. "Be careful," she warned, her voice barely a whisper. Derek nodded, steeling himself. "I'll be back soon. Just finish what you started." As he slipped out the back door of the workshop, Derek could feel the weight of the moment. There was no going back now. He had no idea what the Empire's ships looked like, but he knew one thing. He had to buy Calitha as much time as possible. The forest felt darker now, the air thick with anticipation. Derek could sense something was out there, something watching, and as he sprinted into the woods, a small part of him wondered if he would ever see the workshop or Calitha again. Derek ran through the dense forest, his breath coming in quick, shallow bursts. The underbrush snapped under his feet, but he didn't slow down. He had no plan. He was simply running, hoping to draw any potential threat away from the workshop and Calitha. His heart pounded in his chest, each beat louder than the last. The air seemed to grow heavier with every step, and the distant hum of something not quite right buzzed in his ears. Derek pushed himself harder, faster, his thoughts focused only on survival, not his own, but Calitha's. He could feel the weight of her trust on his shoulders. She had believed in him, and now he had to do everything he could to protect her. He didn't know how long he had been running, but the forest around him seemed to grow eerily quiet. Even the wind had stopped, leaving an unnatural silence that made his skin crawl. His instincts screamed that something was near, but he saw nothing. Still, the feeling of being watched never left. Suddenly, the hum he had heard earlier grew louder. The sound was mechanical, metallic, something large, something powerful. Derek's eyes scanned the sky, his heart skipping a beat when he saw it. A ship. It hovered above the treetops, its dark form blending with the night sky. Derek felt a rush of panic flood his system. This wasn't just a reconnaissance ship, it was an Empire vessel, he could tell. He had no idea how they had found him, but there it was, hovering in the distance, its sensors scanning the forest floor. The ship paused for a moment, as if considering its next move. Derek crouched behind a thick tree trunk, trying to steady his breath. His mind raced. Calitha was still in the workshop. He needed to make sure the Empire didn't find her. A small part of him wondered if he could simply run and hide. But he had no choice now. He wasn't just a researcher anymore. He was a protector. He took a deep breath, his hand resting on the rough bark of the tree. A plan began to form in his mind. He would need to draw the ship's attention elsewhere. But first, he needed to get to higher ground. Derek moved swiftly, staying low to the ground, towards a small hill where a few rocks jutted up. From there, he could get a better view of the ship and maybe, just maybe, create a distraction. The sky above was dark, the stars barely visible as the ship's lights began to flicker, scanning the area below. As he climbed the rocks, Derek's thoughts kept going back to Calitha. The calm trust she had shown when they first met, the way she had allowed him to help. She was alone now, working to fix her ship, and the Empire was hunting her down. Derek couldn't let that happen. He reached the top of the hill and crouched down, trying to remain hidden. The ship's hum grew louder, and he could hear the whir of its engines preparing to descend. Derek knew he had only moments before they would begin searching on foot. His plan had to work. Just as the ship's lights swept over the hill, Derek threw a small metal canister into the distance. The sound of it clanging against the trees drew the ship's attention, and it immediately adjusted its position, moving toward the noise. Derek didn't waste a second. He turned and sprinted back toward the workshop, his heart racing faster than his legs could carry him. As he ran, he thought about Calitha. He could still hear her words in his mind. "Your kindness is unexpected." Derek couldn't fail her now. Derek's legs burned as he sprinted back toward the workshop, his mind focused on one thing: Calitha. The Empire's ship was moving closer, its lights flashing through the trees. He could feel its presence, like a shadow hanging over him, but he couldn't stop now. He reached the workshop just as the door swung open. Calitha stood in the doorway, her eyes wide with worry. She had heard the ship too. "They found us," she said, her voice calm but filled with urgency. Derek nodded, panting. "I threw something to draw them away. We don't have much time." Calitha didn't hesitate. "Good. We need to finish the repairs quickly." They both rushed inside. The energy from the ship's sensors was growing stronger now, and Derek could feel the pressure mounting. Calitha moved to the workbench where she had left the broken parts of her ship, her alien hands moving with incredible speed. Derek joined her, trying to make himself useful, though he knew he didn't understand the technology as well as she did. He grabbed a wrench and tried tightening a few bolts, but Calitha's steady gaze on him told him that he wasn't helping much. "This will not be enough," Calitha said, examining the damage. "The core needs to be recharged before I can access the power systems again." "Where do we get power for that?" Derek asked. Calitha's eyes flicked to a nearby shelf where a few old batteries lay. She picked one up and turned it over in her hands. "This may work for a short time," she said thoughtfully. "But I will need to generate more power if we are to leave before they return." Derek watched her, trying to understand. "How do you generate more power?" "I need to connect my ship to a stable energy source," she said, tapping her chin. "Your planet has many sources, but they are not compatible with my technology. I will need to use your electrical grid." Derek's heart skipped a beat. "You want to connect the ship to the power grid? That could be dangerous. The government would notice right away." Calitha looked at him, her eyes calm. "It is our only option. If I do not complete the repairs, they will find us. If they find us, they will destroy everything." Derek felt the weight of her words. There was no turning back now. If they were going to do this, they had to act fast. "Okay," he said, determination in his voice. "I'll help you connect it to the grid. We need to hurry." Calitha nodded and led him to the back of the workshop, where an old, unused power line ran into the building. She connected a few wires from the ship to the power source, her hands moving deftly, despite the unfamiliar equipment. Derek helped her, his mind racing. He had no idea if this would work, but he couldn't afford to question it now. As Calitha worked, Derek glanced out the window. The night had fallen completely, and the ship's hum was growing louder. He knew they were running out of time. "Is it working?" he asked, his voice tight with tension. Calitha didn't answer right away. She concentrated, her hands moving faster now as she manipulated the ship's systems. Then, finally, the ship's lights flickered to life. The hum of its engines grew stronger, and Derek could feel the air around them begin to shift with energy. "It is working," Calitha said softly, a hint of relief in her voice. "But we must hurry. The energy surge will alert them." Derek felt a rush of hope. They might actually make it, but they weren't out of danger yet. "Let's finish this," Derek said, determination burning in his chest. As the ship's power systems roared to life, Derek knew they were one step closer to survival. But they had to leave before the Empire found them. The ship's engines hummed louder now, the power grid feeding energy into the damaged systems. Derek stood back, watching as Calitha worked quickly, her fingers moving with precision as she manipulated the ship's control panels. The air was thick with tension, and every second felt like it could be their last. "They'll be here soon," Derek said, glancing nervously out the window. The sound of the Empire's ship hovering above the trees was unmistakable, its low hum like a warning bell. Calitha didn't respond. She was focused, her eyes glowing with determination as she bypassed the ship's damaged systems, making repairs faster than Derek thought possible. But he could see the exhaustion in her face. This wasn't easy for her. And the clock was ticking. "Are you sure this will work?" Derek asked, trying to steady his nerves. "I have no choice," Calitha replied, her voice steady despite the pressure. "Your planet's technology is primitive, but I will make it work." The ship's control panel flickered to life, and Calitha nodded in satisfaction. "We're almost there. Just a few more adjustments." Derek felt a surge of relief. They might actually make it out. But his relief was short-lived as he heard something outside. The unmistakable sound of boots crunching on the forest floor. "They've landed," Derek whispered, his heart racing. "We have to move. Now." Calitha didn't hesitate. She moved swiftly to the ship's entrance, her eyes scanning the surrounding area. The ship's doors slid open with a soft hiss, and she motioned for Derek to follow her. "Come," she said urgently. "I will finish the repairs once we are in the air." Derek nodded and followed her onto the ship. The inside of the vessel was like nothing he had ever seen. Sleek, smooth surfaces that seemed to glow with a soft light. He barely had time to take it all in before Calitha was at the controls, her hands flying over the panels. "Hold on," she said, her voice tense. "We need to move fast." The ship's engines roared to life, and Derek felt his body press against the seat as they shot into the sky. The forest below them grew smaller, the trees and land turning into a blur as they ascended. But Derek didn't feel safe yet. They weren't out of danger. Calitha's face was set in concentration as she worked the controls. I am initiating the cloaking system. They will not see us for long. Derek watched as a soft, shimmering glow enveloped the ship. It became nearly invisible against the night sky, but he could still feel the presence of the Empire's ship close behind. They're following us, Derek said, his voice tight. Calitha's eyes flashed with determination. They won't be able to track us for long. I know their systems. But even as she spoke, the Empire's ship began to fire. The first blast hit the side of Calitha's ship with a violent shake, sending Derek's stomach lurching. He grabbed the edge of his seat to steady himself. They're targeting us, Derek said, panic rising in his chest. I know, Calitha replied, her voice calm but filled with urgency. I need to boost the power to the shields. Just hold on. The ship rocked again as another blast hit. Calitha gritted her teeth, her hands moving quickly to stabilize the ship. Derek held his breath, watching her work with a quiet sense of awe. Despite the chaos around them, Calitha remained focused. She wasn't just running away. She was fighting for survival. For both of them. And Derek knew that whatever happened next, he would stand by her. The ship rocked violently as another blast from the Empire's vessel shook them both. Derek's heart pounded in his chest, the sound of the ship's engines roaring in his ears. He could feel the heat from the blast creeping through the hull, the energy of the attack burning against the ship's shields. Calitha's face was set in concentration, her eyes focused on the controls as she worked to keep the ship in the air. Her hands flew across the panels, manipulating the systems with an ease that left Derek in awe. Despite the chaos around them, she remained calm, determined to survive. We can't outrun them forever, Derek said, his voice tight. The Empire's ship was still behind them, its sensors locked onto their vessel. What's the plan? Calitha's eyes flicked briefly to him. We need to get to the edge of your atmosphere. If I can generate enough power, I can make a jump to deep space. But it won't be easy. It will take time. Derek nodded, but a sinking feeling in his stomach told him that time was something they didn't have. The Empire's ship was gaining on them, and every second brought them closer to being caught. We can't let them catch us, Derek said, the fear creeping into his voice. I know, Calitha replied softly. But we are out of options. The ship shuddered as another blast hit, this time causing a loud metallic groan. Sparks flew from the control panel, and Calitha cursed under her breath. I need to stabilize the power before we lose the engine, she muttered, working quickly to reroute the energy. Derek watched her, feeling the weight of their situation pressing down on him. The Empire's ship was still firing, each shot bringing them closer to destruction. He realized something then. They weren't just running. They were fighting a battle they couldn't win, not without a sacrifice. Calitha's hands moved faster, but she didn't seem to notice the sweat beading on her forehead or the way her breath was coming faster. Derek could see the toll the stress was taking on her, but she didn't falter. What if I stay behind? Derek blurted out before he could stop himself. Calitha glanced at him, her eyes narrowing in confusion. What do you mean? I'll stay here and keep the ship flying while you jump to safety, Derek said. I can buy you enough time to escape. They'll focus on me, and you can get away. Calitha shook her head. No, I will not leave you behind. But it's the only way, Derek insisted, his voice firm. You're the one they're after. I'll be a distraction. I can do this. I can hold them off long enough for you to escape. Calitha was silent for a long moment, her eyes searching Derek's face. Finally, she spoke. I cannot let you do that. Derek's heart sank, but he could see the resolve in her eyes. You don't have a choice. If you don't escape now, they'll both kill you and destroy Earth. She hesitated, then finally nodded. Very well. But if I do this, you must promise me something. Anything, Derek said quickly. You will survive. You will return home. Earth needs you. Calitha's voice was soft, but the weight of her words was undeniable. Promise me, Derek. "I promise," Derek whispered. With one final glance at him, Calitha turned back to the controls, her hands flying across the console as she initiated the power surge. Derek watched, knowing that their time was running out. The ship lurched as it gained speed, the Empire's vessel still on their tail. Derek looked out the window one last time, watching as the darkness of space began to swallow them whole. Calitha's eyes met his once more. "Goodbye, Derek." And then, with a final surge of energy, the ship broke free of Earth's atmosphere, disappearing into the depths of space. Derek stood alone, the quiet of space surrounding him, the reality of his sacrifice setting in. He had kept his promise. She was safe, but the cost had been everything. And now, Earth's survival depended on what came next. Derek stood alone in the silence of space, his body still vibrating from the ship's last surge of power. The cold, dark void stretched out before him, empty and vast. His heart was heavy with the weight of his decision. Calitha had escaped, he had kept his promise. But now he was stranded and Earth's future was uncertain. The Empire's ship was still somewhere behind him, but he couldn't see it. He wasn't sure if they'd been able to follow Calitha's ship through the jump, or if they were still tracking him. The quiet was unsettling, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Derek took a deep breath and tried to steady his thoughts. His mind raced with possibilities. Calitha had escaped, but that didn't mean they were safe. The Empire was relentless. They wouldn't stop until they got what they wanted, and Derek couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. He glanced at the damaged ship, its systems still flickering weakly. He had no idea how much longer it would last. It had been through so much, and so had he. Derek wasn't an expert on alien technology, but he knew enough to realize that fixing the ship wouldn't be simple. It would take time. Time he didn't have. The thought of returning to Earth crossed his mind, but the risks were too high. The Empire could be anywhere. They could have already detected the disturbance from Calitha's ship leaving the planet's atmosphere. If he returned, he would put Earth in more danger. No, he couldn't go back yet. Instead, Derek focused on the small communication console in front of him. He had managed to reroute enough power to send a signal, but the frequency was weak. It might take days for someone to find it, but he had to try. He tapped a few buttons, hoping to connect with someone. Anyone who might be able to help. The screen flickered to life, showing a series of static-filled images. Derek's heart skipped a beat. Was this a response? "Is anyone out there?" he said aloud, his voice shaky. "This is Derek Harper. I've made contact with an alien. The Empire is coming. We need help." He stared at the screen, waiting for a response. The minutes dragged on, each second feeling like an eternity. The static buzzed louder in his ears, making his head ache. Then, just as he was about to give up, a faint voice crackled through the noise. "Derek, is that you?" He could hardly believe it. The voice was clear now, unmistakable. "Calitha?" he asked, his heart leaping. "Yes, it is me," she replied, her voice softer this time, but still strong. "I escaped. I'm safe, but the Empire, they know I am gone. They will search for me, and for you." Derek felt a wave of relief wash over him. She was alive. She had made it, but there was no time to celebrate. "We need to plan," Derek said, his voice firm. "I don't know how much time we have. The Empire won't stop, but I'll do whatever it takes to keep Earth safe. And I'll find you, Calitha. I promise." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Derek could hear Calitha breathing softly, perhaps trying to come to terms with what had happened, with the choices they'd both made. "Thank you, Derek," Calitha said finally. "You are not alone. We will figure this out together, but we must be careful. The Empire's reach is vast. We cannot let them find us." Derek nodded, even though she couldn't see him. He had no idea what the future held, but for the first time since this journey began, he felt a flicker of hope. He wasn't alone. They weren't alone. Together, they could fight. Together, they could protect Earth. And that was enough to keep going. Derek leaned back in his seat, staring out at the endless stars that filled the vast emptiness of space. The quiet hum of the ship's engines was the only sound in the cockpit. He could still feel the weight of the last few days pressing on him. But now, with Calitha safe and the promise of help on the way, the uncertainty that had once gripped him seemed to loosen. He glanced at the small communication screen, where Calitha's face had appeared only hours ago. They had exchanged information, working out a plan to stay hidden, to keep Earth safe from the Empire's reach. It wasn't much, but it was a start. They couldn't fight the Empire alone. Not yet. But together, they could outsmart them. Derek believed that. He had to. "We'll be careful," Calitha had told him, her voice steady. "I'll do everything I can to protect both of us. But I need you to stay hidden for now. The Empire is still looking for you." Derek had nodded then, understanding the weight of her words. They couldn't let their guard down. Not yet. Now, as the hours passed, Derek's mind wandered. He thought about Earth, about everything he was leaving behind. But even more, he thought about Calitha, the alien woman who had come to him from the stars, who had trusted him with her life. He had promised to keep her safe, and he had done that. But their fight was far from over. The communication system flickered on again. This time, Calitha's face appeared in full, her expression serious but determined. "Derek, I have news," she said, her voice sharp. "The Empire is not going to give up. But I found something. A way to fight back." Derek sat up straighter, his heart picking up speed. "What do you mean?" "There is a hidden group of my people who have been in hiding for years. They are powerful, and they know how to resist the Empire's control. I'm going to contact them, and we'll need your help." Derek's mind raced. This was the breakthrough they needed. They weren't alone in this fight after all. There was hope. "I'll do whatever it takes," he replied, his voice steady. "We'll beat them, Calitha. I believe in us. I believe in you." A soft smile tugged at Calitha's lips, and for the first time, Derek saw a glimmer of relief in her eyes. "Thank you, Derek. I never thought I'd find someone like you. Together, we can do anything." As their conversation ended, Derek sat back in his seat, feeling a sense of purpose he hadn't known before. He wasn't just a researcher anymore. He wasn't just a human caught in something far bigger than himself. He was part of something important, part of a team. A team that would fight for Earth, for Calitha's people, and for their future. Derek looked out at the stars once more. It felt like a new beginning. The road ahead would be difficult, and the dangers were far from over. But with Calitha by his side, and the hope of new allies, he felt ready. They would face the Empire together, and no matter what, they would protect everything they cared about. And as the ship continued its quiet journey through the stars, Derek knew that this was only the beginning, a beginning of something much larger than anything he had ever imagined.